I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. At 72 years old, I've learned that justice doesn't always come from courtrooms or police stations. Sometimes it comes from a mother's love and a well-planned power outage. My name is Eleanor, and 3 months ago, I sat in the underground wine cellar of my $60 million vineyard, my finger hovering over a master control switch. Above me, 200 wedding guests were celebrating what they thought was my son Marcus's happiest day. What they didn't know was that I was about to plunge them all into complete darkness. You see, Marcus's bride Victoria had made one crucial mistake. She'd uninvited me from their wedding, a wedding they'd booked at my own vineyard. She thought she was so clever, cutting the old woman out of the picture. She had no idea that the old woman owned every vine, every building, and every electrical circuit they were standing on. The security cameras showed Victoria in my grandmother's stolen wedding dress, reciting vows that were nothing but lies. Marcus stood beside her, pale and hollow-eyed, a shadow of the boy I'd raised. They thought they'd already won. They thought I was just some confused old woman who'd fade away quietly. They were about to learn the truth about underestimating a mother's love. I pressed the switch. Every light went out. The electronic locks engaged with a soft click that sealed their fate. Emergency lighting bathed the vineyard in an eerie red glow as 200 guests found themselves trapped in what was about to become the most spectacular public humiliation I'd ever orchestrated. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why I did what I did, you need to know how deep their betrayal went. You need to understand that this wasn't just about a wedding invitation. This was about attempted murder, fraud, and a scheme so cold it still makes my hands shake when I think about it. So, let me start from the beginning, when I still believed my son loved me, and his fiancée was just a sweet girl who'd stolen his heart. Have you ever felt that moment when everything you thought you knew about someone shatters like glass? When you realize that the person you'd die for has been planning your death? If you have, then you'll understand why I had to do what I did. If you haven't, I pray you never will. But either way, I hope my story helps you recognize the warning signs I missed. Because this could happen to anyone. It starts small, so small you barely notice. A comment here, a suggestion there. Before you know it, you're isolated, confused, and questioning your own reality. I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me about a time when you had to find strength after feeling invisible in your own family. Your story matters, and by sharing it, we remind each other that we're not alone in this fight. Let me tell you something about family betrayal, and I want you to really listen to this. When a stranger hurts you, it stings. But when your own child, the baby you held through sleepless nights, the teenager you supported through heartbreak, the adult you trusted with your business when that child turns against you, it doesn't just sting. It tears a hole in your soul that never quite heals the same way. I'm sitting here in my kitchen now, 3 months after everything happened, watching the morning sun paint golden streaks across my vineyard. The same vineyard Victoria thought she could steal. The same vines Marcus helped me tend for 23 years before she poisoned his mind against me. This could be your story too. Maybe it already island. How many of you have watched a toxic partner isolate your child from your family? How many have seen someone you love turn cold and distant, speaking words that sound nothing like the person you raised? If you've been there, you know that helpless feeling, that desperate search for the child you remember inside this stranger who suddenly sees you as the enemy. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I am too controlling. Maybe I am selfish. Maybe they're right about me. That's exactly what Victoria wanted me to think. But here's what I learned. Sometimes loving your family means fighting for them, even when they're fighting against you. Sometimes protecting the people you love requires making decisions that break your heart. And sometimes, just sometimes, justice comes not from giving up, but from refusing to let the manipulators win. I need to take you back to understand how it all began. Back to when my Robert died 15 years ago, leaving me with a struggling 20-acre winery and a mountain of debt. Back to when Marcus was 27, fresh out of business school, eager to help his grieving mother save the family legacy. We worked 18-hour days together. Side by side in the dirt, in the business office, at farmers' markets, selling our wine bottle by bottle. Marcus had his father's gentle hands with the vines and his grandfather's head for numbers. Together, we transformed that failing winery into Whitmore Vineyard's $60 million of prime Sonoma County real estate, award-winning wines, and a reputation that took decades to build. Marcus was my partner in everything. My son, my business partner, my best friend. When he was 38 and still unmarried, I used to tease him. "You're married to the vines," I'd say. "Someday the right woman will come along and appreciate what we've built here." I should have been more specific. I should have said the right woman would appreciate what we'd built and want to be part of it, not take it over. Victoria arrived 2 years ago like a summer storm. Beautiful, charming, and utterly focused on my son. She was 31, a marketing consultant from San Francisco with an expensive wardrobe and a silver tongue. Marcus was completely smitten. At first, I was thrilled. My son was in love, truly in love, for the first time in his life. Victoria seemed interested in the vineyard, asking thoughtful questions about our processes, our history, our plans for expansion. She complimented my business sense, praised Marcus's dedication, and fit into our family dinners like she belonged there. But my mother-in-law, Rose, used to say something that echoed in my mind during those early months. Rose had passed 5 years earlier at 93, sharp as a tack until the very end. She used to study people with those wise gray eyes of hers and say, "Eleanor, watch out for the ones who smile with their teeth but not their eyes. They're performing, not feeling." I thought about Rose's warning, but I pushed it aside. Victoria seemed genuine. She was making Marcus happy. And honestly, after 15 years of being the only woman in his life, I was ready to share that responsibility. What I didn't realize was that Victoria wasn't interested in sharing anything. She wanted it all. The changes started so gradually that I almost missed them entirely. That's how manipulative people work. They don't slap you in the face on day one. They start with tiny adjustments, small suggestions that seem reasonable, even helpful. Victoria's first move was to organize our family dinners. "Eleanor, you work so hard," she'd say, rubbing Marcus's shoulders as he sat at my kitchen table. "Why don't you let me handle Sunday dinners? I love to cook, and it would give you a break." It seemed thoughtful. Sweet, even. But suddenly, our Sunday dinners moved from my kitchen, where we'd gathered every week for 23 years, to restaurants Victoria chose. Expensive places where the conversation had to stay surface level because the tables were too close together for family business. Places where Marcus wore a suit instead of his comfortable work clothes, where he checked his phone constantly and seemed more concerned with impressing Victoria than talking to me. "Mom's getting set in her ways," I heard him tell Victoria one evening as they walked to their car. I didn't know I was standing at my bedroom window, or that sound carries across the vineyard at dusk. Maybe dining out is good for her. Set in my ways? I'd built a $60 million business by adapting, innovating, and taking risks. But apparently, wanting to have dinner in my own home made me rigid. Next came the helpful suggestions about the business. Victoria had ideas, so many ideas. "Eleanor, have you considered modernizing your marketing approach? Social media is everything now. Marcus and I could handle the digital presence while you focus on, well, whatever you're most comfortable with." Whatever I was most comfortable with? I'd been running marketing campaigns since before Victoria learned to spell Instagram. But she said it so sweetly, with such apparent concern for my comfort, that Marcus nodded along. "Mom, Victoria has some great insights about reaching younger customers," he said during one of our Monday morning business meetings. "Maybe we should let her take point on the rebrand." Rebrand? We were rebranding the vineyard I'd spent 15 years building? What's wrong with our current brand? I asked, genuinely confused. Victoria leaned forward with that practiced smile. "Nothing's wrong with it, Eleanor. It's just, well, it appeals to an older demographic. We need to think about sustainability, about attracting millennial wine buyers who care about social responsibility and modern values. Modern values? As opposed to what my ancient, outdated values of hard work and family legacy? But the real poison came in how Victoria repositioned every conversation. If I disagreed with one of her suggestions, I was being resistant to change. If I wanted to maintain control over decisions about my own business, I was being controlling and possessive. If I tried to spend one-on-one time with Marcus, I was monopolizing his attention and not respecting his relationship. She never said these things directly to me, of course. Victoria was too smart for that. She said them to Marcus, in private conversations that I only caught pieces of. But gradually, I watched my son's face change when he looked at me. The easy warmth was replaced by careful politeness. The spontaneous hugs became obligatory kisses on the cheek. Our rambling conversations about Vineyard dreams turned into brief updates about production numbers. Marcus started forgetting things. Not big things, small details that had always mattered to him. He forgot that I preferred my coffee black in the morning meetings. He forgot that Thursday afternoons were when I reviewed the books alone, a routine we'd maintained for over a decade. He forgot to ask my opinion before making decisions about staff scheduling and equipment purchases. When I mentioned these changes, Victoria was ready with explanations. Eleanor? Marcus is just growing into his role as a business partner. It's healthy for him to take more initiative. Or, you know how focused Marcus gets when he's working on a project. I'm sure he doesn't mean to leave you out. Leave me out? It was my vineyard, my life's work. But suddenly I was being left out of decisions about my own business. And apparently, this was healthy growth. The financial manipulation started around month 8. Victoria began using Marcus's credit cards that were linked to our business accounts for what she called research expenses, dinners at competitors' wineries, weekend trips to Napa to study their marketing strategies, expensive wine courses that would help her better understand our product. Every charge came with a reasonable explanation. Every expense was justified as an investment in our future, but the numbers added up quickly. $5,000 one month, $8,000 the next. By month 10, Victoria's research was costing us more than our annual marketing budget. When I questioned the expenses during our monthly financial review, Marcus got defensive. Mom, Victoria is working hard to help us grow. These aren't frivolous purchases, they're business investments. $1,500 for a single dinner is a business investment? I asked, holding up the credit card statement. That was a networking dinner with the sommelier from that high-end restaurant chain. Victoria thinks they might carry our wines. And did they? Number. But there was always another opportunity, another contact, another essential expense that would pay off eventually. Victoria also insisted on being added to various vineyard contracts. For insurance purposes, she explained, if something happens to Marcus, we want to make sure the business continuity is protected. It made sense on the surface. Marcus was engaged to this woman. Of course, she'd be concerned about protecting their future together. But Rose's voice whispered in my memory, Eleanor, when someone's in a hurry to get their name on your papers, ask yourself why they can't wait. I should have asked. I should have questioned why Victoria needed to be added to our equipment lease agreements, our supplier contracts, our insurance policies. But Marcus was so happy, so enthusiastic about their shared vision for the vineyard's future. And honestly, after 15 years of carrying the business burden alone, part of me was relieved to have help, even if that help came with complications. The worst part was how Victoria made me doubt my own perceptions. When I mentioned that Marcus seemed distant, she'd say, Eleanor, I think you might be imagining things. Marcus talks about you constantly, how much he respects your business sense, how grateful he is for everything you've taught him. When I expressed concern about the mounting expenses, she'd respond with, Oh, Eleanor, you worry so much about money. But that's understandable, you came from a generation that had to be careful about every penny. Marcus and I see these as investments in growth, not costs to worry about. Every concern I raised was reframed as a Character flaw. I was paranoid, old-fashioned, overly emotional, or simply misunderstanding the situation. Meanwhile, Victoria positioned herself as the voice of reason, the modern business mind that could bridge the gap between my outdated methods and Marcus's innovative ideas. But the most insidious poison was how she isolated Marcus from our family history. Victoria had no interest in the stories that connected Marcus to his father, his grandfather, or the legacy we'd built together. When I'd start reminiscing about the early days, the struggles, the small victories, the dreams Robert and I had shared, Victoria would check her phone or steer the conversation toward future plans. "That's sweet, Eleanor, but Marcus and I are more focused on where we're going than where we've been," she'd say, taking his hand and pulling his attention away from my memories. Gradually, Marcus stopped asking about his father. He stopped visiting the small memorial garden I'd created near the original vineyard. He stopped talking about the values and traditions that had guided our family for 3 generations. Under Victoria's influence, our history became irrelevant, something to move beyond rather than build upon. By the time they'd been together 18 months, I felt like a stranger in my own life. My son spoke to me like I was an elderly employee who needed careful management. My opinions were politely acknowledged and quietly ignored. My business decisions were questioned, my methods criticized, and my concerns dismissed. And through it all, Victoria smiled that perfect smile and called me Mom. I knew something was deeply wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. Every time I tried to discuss my concerns with Marcus, he'd defend Victoria and gently suggest that I was having trouble adjusting to his happiness. When I mentioned my worries to our longtime friends and business associates, they'd say things like, "Eleanor, you've been so protective of Marcus for so long. Maybe it's hard to see him with someone new." Was I losing my mind? Was I really just a possessive mother who couldn't accept her son's independence? Victoria's gaslighting was so skillful, so persistent, that I began to question my own judgment. That's when I decided to do something Rose would have approved of. I started paying closer attention, not just to what Victoria said, but to what she did when she thought no one was watching. And that's when I discovered the truth that would change everything. The truth came to me on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in February, exactly 18 months after Victoria entered our lives. Marcus had driven to San Francisco for a wine distribution meeting, and Victoria was supposedly at her apartment, working on what she called our digital marketing transformation. I was in Marcus's home office, the converted bedroom in the house where he'd grown up, where Robert and I had tucked him in every night for 18 years. I was looking for our insurance policy documents because our coverage was up for renewal, and Marcus had been handling those files recently. That's when I saw his laptop sitting open on the desk. The screen had gone dark, but when I touched the trackpad to wake it up, I found myself staring at a folder labeled VWT Project. My heart stopped. Victoria Whitmore Trust Project. What trust? I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was an invasion of privacy. But Rose's voice was screaming in my head. When your gut tells you something's wrong, Eleanor, you listen to your gut. I clicked the folder open. The first document was a property transfer form for Whitmore Vineyards. My vineyard. My life's work. According to the document, ownership was being transferred from Eleanor Whitmore to Marcus James Whitmore, with Victoria Ann Collins listed as the primary beneficiary in case of Marcus's incapacitation or death. My signature was at the bottom of the page, except I'd never seen this document before in my life. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely click on the next file. It was another forged document, this one declaring my intent to step down from all business operations due to declining mental capacity and increasing confusion about financial matters. Again, my signature. Again, completely fake. There were dozens of documents, powers of attorney, business partnership agreements, even a new will that left everything to Marcus, with very specific language about Victoria's rights as his spouse. Every single one bore my forged signature, and every single one had been created to strip me of everything I'd spent my life building, but the documents were just the beginning. The next folder contained audio files. The first recording was Victoria's voice, talking to someone I didn't recognize. The old woman is finally starting to lose it. Marcus noticed she forgot about the staff meeting last week, and I made sure to point out how she's been repeating herself lately. He's getting worried about her memory. I sat there in my son's childhood bedroom, listening to this woman systematically destroy my reputation with calculated lies. The second recording was worse. Marcus is completely convinced now that his mother needs help managing her affairs. I've been documenting every little mistake she makes, every time she seems confused or forgetful. Next month, I'm going to suggest he talk to a lawyer about getting conservatorship. Conservatorship? They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent? But the third recording made my blood turn to ice. Thompson, we need to speed up the timeline, Victoria's voice said clearly. The wedding is in 6 months, and I want full control of the assets before then. How quickly can we get the incompetency hearing scheduled? A man's voice responded, Slow down, Victoria. We need more documentation of her mental decline. A few forged signatures aren't enough. We need medical records, witness statements, a pattern of incompetent decision-making. Then we create the pattern, Victoria snapped. I've been putting mercury in her morning supplements for 3 months now. Small doses, nothing that would kill her immediately, but enough to cause fatigue, memory problems, and confusion. The symptoms are already showing. Mercury poisoning. She'd been slowly poisoning me. Once the conservatorship is in place, how long before we can arrange the accident? Victoria continued. Give me 6 months after the wedding, the man Thompson replied. Let her transfer everything to Marcus first. Let him get comfortable with full ownership. Then we stage something that looks natural. A fall down the cellar stairs, maybe. An accidental overdose of her medications. Something that doesn't raise suspicions. I sat in that chair, listening to them plan my murder, and something inside me died. Not from fear, from rage. Pure, crystalline rage that burned away every doubt, every second guess, every moment of wondering if I was being too protective or too suspicious. They weren't just stealing my vineyard. They were planning to kill me for it. I kept listening, even though every word felt like acid in my veins. The conspiracy went deeper than I'd imagined. Thompson was a disbarred lawyer who specialized in elder fraud. Victoria had met him through a previous boyfriend, another older man, with assets that had mysteriously ended up in Victoria's control after his accidental death 3 years earlier. This wasn't her first time. I learned that Victoria had been researching me for months before she ever met Marcus. She knew about the vineyard's value, about my widowed status, about Marcus's bachelor lifestyle and close relationship with his mother. She'd targeted us specifically because we fit her preferred victim profile: wealthy, isolated, trusting, and emotionally vulnerable. She'd seduced my son as part of a business plan. The recordings revealed her true opinion of Marcus, too. To Thompson, she called him useful but pathetic, completely manipulated, and too weak to be a problem once his mother is gone. She planned to stay married to him just long enough to establish legal rights to the inheritance, then arrange his accident, too, making herself a grieving widow with a $60 million vineyard. My son wasn't her partner in this scheme. He was another victim, as doomed as I was. I found evidence of Victoria's previous crimes in another folder. Photos of newspaper clippings about Harold Peterson, a 70-year-old widower who died in a tragic fall at his Mendocino winery 6 months before Victoria met Marcus. Harold had recently changed his will to leave everything to his new wife, Victoria Collins, though she'd been using a different first name then. There was another victim before Harold, and another before him. Victoria was a serial killer who used marriage and forged documents to steal everything from lonely older men, then eliminated them when they were no longer useful. But she'd made one critical error. She'd assumed I was like her other victims, isolated, dependent, and too trusting to fight back. She'd seen a 70-year-old widow and thought she'd found another easy target. Victoria had no idea who she was dealing with. I sat in that room for 2 hours, copying every file onto a secure flash drive, photographing every document with my phone, and planning my next move. The grief I felt for Marcus's betrayal, even though he was being manipulated, was overwhelming. But stronger than grief was determination. I wasn't going to die in my wine cellar. I wasn't going to let Victoria murder my son after she finished with me, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let her steal the vineyard that Robert and I had built with our own hands. By the time I heard Marcus's car in the driveway, I was back in my own kitchen, calmly preparing dinner. I kissed my son's cheek when he walked in, asked about his meeting, and listened to him talk about Victoria's latest marketing ideas. And I smiled. Because I'd learned something important that afternoon. I'd learned that sometimes the best way to fight a predator is to let them think they're still hunting you while you're actually hunting them. Victoria thought she was 3 months away from destroying me. What she didn't realize was that she'd just given me everything I needed to destroy her first. The war was about to begin, and this time, I was going to be the one with the element of surprise. The hardest part about discovering a conspiracy against your life isn't the shock, it's pretending everything is normal while you figure out your next move. For 3 days after finding those files, I had to sit across from Victoria at dinner, watch her smile, that practice smile, and resist the urge to confront her about the mercury she'd been feeding me. Instead, I threw away every supplement bottle in my medicine cabinet and started drinking only bottled water I kept locked in my bedroom. Within a week, the fog that had been clouding my thoughts for months began to clear. The fatigue that Victoria had convinced Marcus was normal aging started lifting. My memory sharpened like a blade. She'd been poisoning me, all right, but not enough to kill me quickly, just enough to make everyone believe I was losing my mental capacity. Big mistake, Victoria. Because a clear-headed Eleanor Whitmore was about to become your worst nightmare. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. Victoria and Thompson had been planning this for months, maybe years. They had legal documents, medical evidence, and a timeline for my murder. I needed help from people I could trust completely, people who knew me well enough to recognize that I was fighting for my life. My first call was to Patricia Hendricks. Patricia and I had been friends for 37 years, ever since our boys played Little League together. She'd retired 5 years ago after serving as a federal judge for 2 decades, but her legal mind was still sharp as a razor. More importantly, she was one of the few people who knew the real Eleanor, not the confused, declining woman that Victoria had been portraying to everyone else. I drove to Patricia's house on Thursday evening, telling Marcus I was going to book club. It wasn't entirely a lie. Patricia and I had been in the same book club for 15 years. "Eleanor, you look terrible," Patricia said when she opened her front door. "Are you feeling all right?" "I'm feeling better than I have in months," I said, "but I need your help. Someone is trying to kill me." Patricia studied my face for a long moment, then stepped aside to let me in. "Tell me everything." I sat in Patricia's living room, the same room where we'd celebrated our sons' graduations, mourned our husbands' deaths, and shared countless bottles of wine over the years, and laid out the entire conspiracy. I showed her the photographs of the forged documents, played the audio recordings, and explained about the mercury poisoning. Patricia listened without interruption, her judicial training evident in how she absorbed every detail. When I finished, she was quiet for several minutes. "Eleanor," she finally said, "this is attempted murder, elder fraud, and conspiracy to commit homicide. We're not talking about family drama here, we're talking about federal crimes." "I know," I said, "but if I go to the police now, what happens?" "Victoria and Thompson destroy the evidence, claim I'm having paranoid delusions, and accelerate their timeline. They could kill me before any investigation gets started." Patricia nodded slowly. "You need more evidence. Documentation of the poisoning, proof of the forgeries, and witnesses to their conspiracy." She paused, then looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "What do you want to do?" "I want to catch them in the act," I said. "I want evidence so solid that no one can dismiss it as the ramblings of a confused old woman. And I want to do it in a way that protects Marcus from whatever fallout comes next." "You'll need professional help," Patricia said. "I know someone." The next morning, Patricia and I met David Chen at a small cafe in Petaluma, 45 minutes from the Vineyard. David was a forensic accountant and private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases involving family businesses. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and the sort of calm demeanor that suggested he'd seen worse things than what I was about to tell him. "Judge Hendricks says you need help with a family situation," David said after we'd ordered coffee. I slid a flash drive across the table. "Someone is systematically stealing my business and planning to murder me for it. I need you to help me stop them." David didn't blink. He plugged the drive into his laptop and spent 20 minutes reviewing the files, while Patricia and I sat in tense silence. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is one of the most sophisticated elder fraud schemes I've ever seen," he said. "The document forgery alone represents dozens of felonies. Add in the poisoning and the murder conspiracy, and we're looking at life sentences for everyone involved. Can you help me?" I asked. "I can help you gather evidence that will put these people away for the rest of their lives," David said. "But I need you to understand something. Once we start this investigation, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son may never recover. Your family will be destroyed. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Marcus, about the little boy who used to follow me through the Vineyard rows, asking 1,000 questions about everything he saw. I thought about his father, who'd built this business with dreams of passing it down to future generations. I thought about Victoria's plan to murder us both and steal everything we'd worked for. "My family is already being destroyed," I said. "At least this way I might be able to save my son's life." David nodded. "Then let's get to work." Over the next 2 weeks, David and I developed our strategy. He would investigate Victoria's background, document the financial fraud, and gather evidence of the conspiracy while staying completely invisible to the targets. I would continue playing the role of the declining, confused mother while secretly working to protect our assets and prepare for the confrontation to come. The first thing David discovered was that Victoria Collins wasn't even Victoria's real name. She was actually Victoria Ann Thompson, no relation to the disbarred lawyer, despite sharing his surname. She'd been using false identities for years, moving from victim to victim across California and Oregon. The real Victoria Collins had died in a car accident 7 years ago, and this woman had stolen her identity. David also found evidence of 2 previous murders that Victoria had committed using the same methods she was planning for Marcus and me. Harold Peterson, the Mendocino winemaker, had died exactly as planned, a fall down his cellar stairs 3 days after changing his will. Before Harold, there was William Chen, no relation to David, in Oregon, who died of an accidental drug overdose 6 months after marrying Victoria under another false name. "She's a serial killer," David told me during one of our clandestine meetings. "She's probably killed at least 6 people over the past decade, maybe more. She targets wealthy widowers and elderly business owners, seduces them or their heirs, then eliminates them after establishing legal rights to their assets. How has she gotten away with it for so long?" I asked. "Because she's smart," David said. "She moves between jurisdictions, uses different identities, and creates enough time between the marriage and the murder that it looks like natural progression. Plus, her victims tend to be isolated and vulnerable. No one investigates too closely when a lonely old man dies after a period of declining health." But David also discovered Victoria's weakness. She was greedy and impatient. Instead of waiting for natural opportunities to steal from her victims, she'd started creating her own timeline through poisoning and forged documents. That urgency was creating evidence, trails that a careful investigation could follow. "The mercury poisoning is going to be key," David explained. "We can get hair and blood samples that will prove she's been drugging you. Combined with the audio recordings and the forged documents, we'll have enough evidence to convict her of attempted murder and conspiracy." "What about Marcus?" I asked. "How do we protect him when this all comes out?" David's expression softened. "Mrs. Whitmore, your son is a victim here too. Victoria has been psychologically manipulating him for 2 years. When the truth comes out, he's going to need therapy, not prosecution. If we handle this right, we can show that he was deceived just as thoroughly as you were." That gave me hope. Maybe, once Victoria was gone and Marcus could see clearly again, we could rebuild our relationship. Maybe he'd understand that everything I did was to save his life. But first, I had to survive long enough to expose her. David and I spent hours planning our approach. We would gather evidence quietly for 6 more weeks, building an unshakable case. Then, instead of going to the police immediately, we would confront Victoria and Thompson publicly, with witnesses and cameras present, forcing them into a position where they couldn't destroy evidence or harm me before the authorities arrived. "You want to trap them," David said, understanding my plan immediately. "I want to humiliate them," I corrected. "I want them exposed in front of everyone they've deceived, with no possibility of escape or denial. I want the world to see exactly who they really are." David smiled for the first time since we'd met. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think I'm going to enjoy working with you." The trap was about to be set, and this time, I was going to be the one controlling when it closed. David proved to be worth every penny of his considerable fee. Within 2 weeks of our partnership, he'd uncovered Victoria's entire network of accomplices and documented a criminal enterprise that stretched back over a decade. But more importantly, he'd found what we needed most: the smoking gun that would destroy her completely. It came in the form of a recorded phone call between Victoria and Thompson, captured by David's surveillance equipment while they met at a restaurant in San Francisco. They thought they were safe, discussing their plans in a crowded public space where no one would pay attention to 2 people having what looked like a business lunch. They were wrong. "Why?" "The old woman's been acting strange lately," Victoria said, her voice clear as crystal on David's recording. "More alert, asking questions about things she should have forgotten by now. I think she's stopped taking the supplements." Thompson's response chilled my blood. "Then we accelerate the timeline. The wedding is in 6 weeks. As soon as the ceremony's over and she's transferred the final assets, we arrange her accident. I've already scouted the wine cellar. Those stone steps are perfect. One push, and it'll look like she lost her balance inspecting the inventory." "What about Marcus?" Victoria asked. "Give it 6 months after his mother's funeral. Let him grieve. Let him get comfortable with full ownership. Then we stage his accident too. Maybe a tractor rollover in the vineyard. Those things happen all the time." "And then?" Victoria's voice carried a note of eager anticipation. "Then you're a grieving widow with a $60 million vineyard and no one left to challenge your inheritance," Thompson said. "We split it 50-50, just like we planned." 50-50? So Victoria wasn't even planning to honor her agreement with her accomplice. Based on what David had discovered about her previous crimes, Thompson would probably have his own accident within a year of my son's murder. But the recording gave us something even more valuable: their timeline. The wedding was in 6 weeks, and they planned to kill me immediately afterward. That gave us a deadline, but it also gave us an opportunity. David and I spent the next month orchestrating the most elaborate sting operation I'd ever imagined. We had 2 goals: gathering unshakable evidence of their conspiracy and creating a trap that would expose them publicly in a way that left no room for denial or escape. The first part of our plan involved what David called controlled surveillance. We needed Victoria and Thompson to incriminate themselves further while believing they were completely safe from discovery. So I began playing my role perfectly. I started acting more confused and forgetful around Victoria, giving her confidence that her poisoning had been successful. I forgot important business meetings, mixed up appointment times, and occasionally seemed disoriented when she was present. The performance required careful balance. I needed to seem mentally compromised without actually damaging the business or raising suspicions among our long-term employees. Victoria ate it up. I watched her document my every mistake with her phone camera, building what she believed was evidence for the conservatorship proceedings. She even started bringing Thompson to the vineyard under the pretense of being a potential investor, letting him see firsthand how confused I'd become. What they didn't know was that David had installed sophisticated surveillance equipment throughout the vineyard. Every conversation, every meeting, every moment of their plotting was being recorded in high definition. The technical side of our trap was more complex. David worked with Tom Rodriguez, our head of Vineyard maintenance, to upgrade our electrical systems under the guise of improving energy efficiency. Tom had worked for us for 12 years and was completely loyal to our family. When David explained that someone was trying to steal the vineyard, Tom was eager to help. "Mrs. Whitmore, you gave my family a chance when no one else would," Tom said when I asked him to be part of our plan. "Whatever you need, you've got it." What we needed was complete control over the vineyard's power systems, security cameras, and electronic locks. Tom helped David install new backup generators, additional security equipment, and a master control system that would allow me to manage everything remotely from the underground wine cellar. The wine cellar became our command center. It was the oldest part of the vineyard, built into the hillside with thick stone walls that provided natural insulation for the wine storage, but also made it perfect for hiding sophisticated electronics. David set up monitors showing feeds from cameras throughout the property, communication equipment that couldn't be detected from outside, and controls for every electrical system on the vineyard. From this room, you'll be able to see everything happening above ground and control every aspect of the vineyard's infrastructure, David explained. When you activate the lockdown protocol, every electronic door will seal, every light will shut off except the emergency system, and every moment will be recorded by cameras that are on independent power supplies. "What about the wedding guests?" I asked. "I don't want innocent people to get hurt." "The lockdown system is designed to contain, not harm," David assured me. "The main hall has emergency exits that can be opened from inside, but the electronic locks will prevent anyone from leaving until the authorities arrive. It'll be uncomfortable and embarrassing, but no one will be in danger." The psychological component of our trap was even more important than the technical aspects. Victoria needed to believe she'd won completely before we exposed her crimes. So I began the most convincing performance of my life. 3 weeks before the wedding, I staged what appeared to be a minor stroke. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Victoria was visiting for what she called wedding planning, though I knew she was actually documenting my mental state for her legal proceedings. I waited until she was taking photos of me in my kitchen, then pretended to lose consciousness for 30 seconds. When I came to, I acted disoriented and weak, asking where I was and seeming not to recognize Victoria immediately. The terror in her eyes quickly shifted to excitement as she realized this episode might be exactly what she needed to accelerate her timeline. "Oh my God, Eleanor!" Victoria exclaimed. Genuine concern in her voice, but David's hidden cameras caught the calculating look in her eyes. "I'm calling Marcus right away!" The next 3 days were a masterclass in manipulation, as Victoria convinced Marcus that I needed immediate medical attention and legal protection. She arranged for a doctor's visit with Thompson, posing as a concerned family friend who just happened to have legal experience in elder care issues. The fake medical examination was almost insulting in its obviousness. The doctor was actually one of Thompson's associates, a man who'd lost his medical license years earlier for insurance fraud. He declared that I was showing clear signs of dementia and recommended immediate conservatorship proceedings to protect my assets. Marcus was devastated. My poor son genuinely believed his mother was losing her mind, and Victoria was there to comfort him through the crisis, while simultaneously pushing him toward the exact legal arrangements she needed to complete her theft. "Marcus, I know this is hard," Victoria said, holding his hands as he cried in our kitchen. "But we have to think about what's best for your mother. She needs protection from herself right now." What I needed was protection from Victoria, but Marcus couldn't see that. The psychological manipulation had been too thorough, too gradual. In his mind, Victoria was his partner in caring for his declining mother, not the predator who was orchestrating our destruction. The final phase of our deception was the most painful, allowing Victoria to believe she'd successfully removed me from the wedding planning entirely. I let her convince Marcus that my episodes made it dangerous for me to be involved in stressful activities. I agreed to let her handle all the details of their ceremony. I even pretended to be confused about the date and location of the wedding itself. "Maybe it's better if Mom doesn't attend?" Marcus said during one of their planning sessions, his voice breaking with grief. She seems so confused lately, and I don't want her to have another episode during the ceremony." Victoria's response was perfect in its manipulative cruelty. "Marcus, that breaks my heart, but you might be right. Maybe we should have a small family celebration afterward, when your mother is feeling better." That's when Victoria made her fatal mistake. Instead of uninviting me quietly, she wanted to humiliate me completely. She arranged for Marcus to deliver a formal letter, supposedly from her lawyer, stating that due to my mental incapacity and recent episodes, I was legally barred from attending the wedding at my own vineyard. The letter was another forgery, of course, but it served Victoria's psychological purposes perfectly. She wanted me to know that she'd won, that she'd stolen my son, my business, and even my right to witness their marriage on my own property. What Victoria didn't realize was that her cruelty had just provided the final element our trap needed: motivation for the most spectacular public humiliation I could devise. As I sat in my kitchen, holding that forged letter, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 years. Pure, undiluted joy. Because Victoria had just given me legal justification for everything I was about to do to her. The trap was set, the prey was confident, and in 2 weeks, the whole world would discover what happens when you try to steal from Eleanor Whitmore. The morning of Marcus's wedding dawned with the kind of crystal-clear sunshine that California wine country is famous for. By 7 a.m., I was already in the underground wine cellar, watching the preparation unfold on multiple monitors as vendors arrived at my vineyard to create what Victoria believed would be her coronation ceremony. She had no idea she was walking into her funeral instead. "David, are you in position?" I spoke into my headset, watching the catering trucks navigate our winding driveway. "Affirmative." David's voice crackled back through the secure channel. "FBI team is standing by at the perimeter. Local police are coordinated. State Attorney General's office has agents in the guest area. Everyone's ready when you give the signal." The irony wasn't lost on me. Victoria had invited federal law enforcement to her own arrest by trying to steal from someone with connections throughout California's legal system. Patricia's 30 years as a federal judge had opened doors I never could have reached alone. On Monitor 3, I watched Victoria emerge from the main house wearing my grandmother's wedding dress. She'd stolen it from my bedroom closet 3 weeks ago, probably while I was pretending to nap after my fake medical episode. The dress had been carefully preserved for 75 years, waiting for the right moment to grace another family wedding. This wasn't that moment, but Victoria was about to learn that some things are worth more than money. "She looks beautiful," Marcus said to Tom Rodriguez, who was setting up chairs in the vineyard courtyard. My son's voice carried across the morning air, picked up perfectly by our hidden microphones. "I just wish Mom could be here to see this." Tom's jaw tightened. He knew exactly where I was and why I wasn't standing beside my son on his wedding day. "Maybe she's here in spirit," Tom replied carefully. "If only you knew," I thought, watching Marcus straighten his tie, the same tie his father had worn to our wedding 43 years ago. Victoria had probably suggested it, another calculated move to manipulate my son's emotions. By 10 a.m., the guests were arriving. I recognized most of them longtime friends, business associates, people who'd known Marcus since he was a child, people who were genuinely confused about my absence and getting increasingly uncomfortable with Victoria's explanations. Eleanor had another one of her episodes. I heard Victoria tell Patricia's husband, George, as he asked about me. The doctors thought it would be too stressful for her to attend. "We're protecting her, really." George looked skeptical. He'd known me for 30 years and had never seen any signs of mental decline. But Victoria was convincing, and Marcus was backing up her story with obvious pain in his voice. What the guests didn't know was that Patricia herself was among the crowd, wearing a discreet wire and ready to serve as a witness when the truth came out. She caught my eye once, glancing directly at one of our hidden cameras, and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was ready. At 11:30, Thompson arrived in an expensive sedan, playing his role as Victoria's family friend perfectly. He looked every inch the successful lawyer he'd once been before losing his license for fraud. What he actually was, of course, was a career criminal who specialized in helping serial killers steal from their victims. I watched Thompson survey the vineyard with calculating eyes, no doubt already planning which buildings to demolish first after my murder. He lingered near the wine cellar entrance, probably confirming the location for my planned accident in a few hours. "Enjoying the view, Thompson?" I whispered to my monitors. "Take a good look, because it's the last time you'll see my vineyard as a free man." At noon, the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Victoria had arranged everything to happen in the vineyard courtyard, surrounded by the grapevines that represented 4 generations of my family's work. She wanted to claim her prize in the heart of everything I'd built. But that's when her timeline hit its first snag. "Mrs. Whitmore," Tom's voice came through my headset. "The bride is getting agitated. She's asking why some of the guests look confused, and someone told her that Judge Hendricks has been asking pointed questions about where you are." Perfect. Victoria's paranoia was starting to show through her carefully constructed facade. I switched to monitor 1 and watched Victoria's face as she spoke to Marcus near the altar. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in her posture, the way her smile looked forced when she thought no one was watching. "The guests seem restless," Marcus was saying. "Maybe we should have found a way to include Mom after all." Victoria's response was sharp enough to be caught by our microphones. "Marcus, your mother is sick. We're doing what's best for everyone, including her. Don't let guilt ruin our special day." But Victoria's mask was slipping. The stress of maintaining her deception in front of 200 people who'd known me for decades was taking its toll. She kept glancing toward the main house, probably wondering if I was watching from my window, planning some last-minute interference with her perfect plan. She had no idea how right she was. At 12:15, the processional music began. I watched Marcus take his position at the altar, looking pale and uncertain despite his formal smile. This should have been the happiest day of his life, but something was clearly bothering him, maybe his conscience finally breaking through 2 years of psychological manipulation. Victoria began her walk down the aisle, my grandmother's dress trailing behind her like a stolen dream. The guests stood, politely applauding, but I could see the uncomfortable glances being exchanged. Too many people here had known my family for too long to accept that I would miss my only son's wedding by choice. As Victoria reached the altar and took Marcus's hands, I heard her whisper something that made my blood boil. "It's just us now, baby. Just us and our future." Our future? She was planning to murder him in 6 months. The officiant began the ceremony with standard words about love, commitment, and family. If he only knew he was witnessing the union between a serial killer and her next victim, he might have chosen different passages. Victoria's vows were a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as romance. "Marcus, you saved me from a life of loneliness. You showed me what it means to be part of a real family, to have a home worth fighting for. I promise to protect what we've built together, to honor your family's legacy, and to love you until my last breath." Every word was a lie. She planned to dishonor our legacy by stealing it, and Marcus's last breath was scheduled for 6 months after mine. But it was Marcus's vows that nearly broke my heart. "Victoria, you helped me see that it was time to grow up, to become the man my father wanted me to be. You showed me how to put our future first, even when it meant making difficult decisions about the past. I promised to build a life with you that would make my parents proud." My poor son thought he was honoring his father's memory by choosing Victoria over me. He had no idea that his new bride had been planning our murders since their first date. The officiant reached the critical moment. "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." This was it, my moment. I reached for the master control switch, my hand steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. In 30 seconds, my son's wedding would become his salvation. Victoria's scheme would collapse in spectacular fashion, and the truth would finally set us all free. "I'm sorry, Marcus," I whispered to the monitors, "but sometimes saving the people you love means breaking their hearts first." I flipped the switch. Every light in the vineyard went out simultaneously. Emergency lighting kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing the wedding party in ominous red illumination. Electronic locks throughout the property engaged with audible clicks. The backup generators hummed to life, powering only the security cameras and my command center. 200 wedding guests found themselves trapped in my vineyard, with no idea what was happening or why. That's when I made my entrance. The cellar door opened, and I stepped into the courtyard wearing the elegant black dress I'd been saving for special occasions, the same dress I'd worn to Robert's memorial service 15 years ago. My hair was perfectly styled, my makeup flawless, and my spine straight with the dignity of someone who'd just saved her family from destruction. I was no longer playing the role of a confused, declining old woman. I was Eleanor Whitmore, owner of this vineyard, mother of the groom, and the woman who was about to expose the most elaborate murder conspiracy in Sonoma County history. Victoria's face went white as she saw me approaching the altar. Marcus's expression shifted from confusion to shock, to something that might have been relief. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent courtyard. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk." The silence that followed my entrance was absolute. 200 people sat frozen in their chairs, emergency lighting casting everything in hellish red shadows, while I walked calmly down the aisle toward my son's wedding altar. Victoria was the first to recover her voice. "Eleanor, what are you doing? You're supposed to be resting," the doctors said. "The doctors said many things," I interrupted, reaching into my purse and pulling out a small remote control. "But today, we're going to hear what you said, Victoria. Or should I call you by your real name, Victoria Ann Thompson?" The color drained from her face completely. Behind her, I saw Thompson start to rise from his seat, but Tom Rodriguez was already moving to block his path. Other vineyard staff members, all of whom I'd briefed on our plan, were quietly positioning themselves at strategic points around the courtyard. "Mom, what's going on?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. "Why are all the lights out? Why can't anyone leave?" "Because your fiancé has been planning to murder us both," I said simply, pressing a button on my remote. The large screens we'd installed for displaying wedding photos flickered to life, but instead of romantic images, they showed documents. Forged property transfers, fake powers of attorney, medical records that had been altered to make me appear mentally incompetent. "These are some of the documents Victoria and her accomplice Thompson have been creating over the past 18 months, I announced to the crowd, "all bearing my forged signature. All designed to steal our vineyard and leave you orphaned, Marcus." Victoria found her voice again, but it was higher now, more desperate. "She's having another episode. This is exactly what the doctors warned us about: paranoid delusions, conspiracy theories. Marcus, call the ambulance." "No one's calling anyone just yet," I said, pressing another button. "Because we haven't gotten to the best part." The screens changed to show audio waveforms, and suddenly Victoria's voice filled the courtyard. "I've been putting mercury in her morning supplements for 3 months now. Small doses, nothing that would kill her immediately, but enough to cause fatigue, memory problems, and confusion." The crowd gasped collectively. Marcus stared at the screens in horror, then looked at Victoria with dawning comprehension. "That's not me!" Victoria screamed. "Someone's faked these recordings. Eleanor's lost her mind and she's trying to calm. Destroy our wedding." "Then you won't mind if we play a few more," I said calmly. Thompson's voice came next. "As soon as the ceremony's over and she's transferred the final assets, we arrange her accident. I've already scouted the wine cellar. Those stone steps are perfect. One push, and it'll look like she lost her balance." Several wedding guests stood up in shock. Patricia's husband was already on his phone, and I could see other people frantically trying to call the police, only to discover that our electronic lockdown had disabled cell service within the vineyard. Victoria's mask was completely gone now. The sweet, caring woman who'd been manipulating my son for 2 years disappeared, replaced by something cold and vicious. "You senile bitch," she snarled. "You have no idea what you've done. Marcus, tell them. Tell them how confused she's been, how she's been making up stories and forgetting simple things." But Marcus wasn't looking at Victoria anymore. He was staring at the screens, listening to more recordings that detailed the systematic poisoning, the forged documents, and the timeline for our murders. "What about Marcus?" Victoria's recorded voice asked on the speakers. "Give it 6 months after his mother's funeral," Thompson's voice replied. Let him grieve, let him get comfortable with full ownership, then we stage his accident too." My son's face went through a series of emotions: shock, betrayal, understanding, and finally, rage. "You were going to kill my mother," he said quietly. "And then, you were going to kill me." "Marcus, listen to me," Victoria pleaded, reaching for his hands. "These recordings are fake. Your mother has been planning this for weeks, trying to break us up because she can't stand to see you happy." "Happy?" Marcus's voice was getting louder. "You've been poisoning her. You've been stealing from our family. Everything you told me about her was a lie." The crowd was getting restless now, with several people demanding to know why they couldn't leave and what was happening. That's when I pressed the final button on my remote. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I'd like you to meet the real Victoria Thompson." The screens changed again, showing newspaper clippings about Harold Peterson, the Mendocino winemaker who died in a tragic fall 6 months before Victoria met Marcus. Then came photos of William Chen in Oregon, who died of an accidental drug overdose after marrying Victoria under a different name. "Victoria is a serial killer," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the increasingly agitated crowd. "She's murdered at least 6 people over the past decade, using the same methods she planned to use on Marcus and me. Marriage, manipulation, forged documents, and then convenient accidents that leave her as the sole inheritor." Victoria snapped completely. She lunged toward me with a fury that proved every word I'd just spoken. "You destroyed everything!" she screamed. "Years of planning. Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" But Tom Rodriguez caught her before she could reach me, holding her easily despite her thrashing attempts to break free. "Let me go!" Victoria shrieked. "I'll kill her myself. I should have poisoned her faster." And there it was, a full confession in front of 200 witnesses and multiple cameras. Thompson was trying to push his way toward the exit, but he was blocked by several guests who'd finally understood what they were witnessing. "This is a setup," he shouted. "That woman is mentally ill. She's fabricated all of this." "Then explain these," I said, pulling out copies of the forged documents I'd found on Marcus's laptop. "Explain why your fingerprints are on property transfer forms bearing my forged signature. Explain why your voice is on recordings discussing my murder." That's when the cavalry arrived. The electronic locks disengaged with a series of clicks, and federal agents poured into the courtyard from multiple directions. Patricia had coordinated everything perfectly: FBI agents, local police, and investigators from the state attorney general's office, all converging on the Vineyard at exactly the right moment. "Victoria Ann Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder fraud, and multiple counts of homicide," announced Special Agent Martinez, the FBI team leader. "Thompson Williams, you're under arrest as an accessory to conspiracy and fraud." Victoria fought the handcuffs every step of the way, screaming threats and denials that only made her look more guilty. "This is entrapment. That old bitch set us up. The recordings are fake. The documents are fake. Marcus, tell them I love you." But Marcus had stepped away from her, horror and disgust clear on his face. "I don't even know who you are," he said quietly. Thompson tried a different approach, attempting to lawyer his way out of the situation even as they cuffed him. "My clients will be filing charges for false imprisonment, defamation, and conspiracy. This entire situation is a violation of their civil rights." "Your clients?" Agent Martinez laughed grimly. "Mr. Williams, you're disbarred. You can't represent anyone. And based on the evidence we've already reviewed, you're looking at life in prison for your role in multiple murders." As the agents led Victoria and Thompson away, the crowd burst into chaos. Some guests were crying, others were shouting questions, and several were taking photos and videos that would be all over social media within hours. But my attention was focused on Marcus, who stood alone at the altar in his wedding tuxedo, staring at the empty space where his bride had been moments before. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I believed her. I thought you were. I thought she was helping you." I walked to my son and took his hands in mine. "She's a professional manipulator, Marcus. What she did to you, the psychological control, the way she isolated you from me and made you doubt your own judgment, that's not your fault. That's what predators do. But I chose her over you," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I believed everything she said about you being controlling and possessive. I let her convince me that you were losing your mind. And I let her," I said firmly, "because I knew that someday you'd see the truth, and when you did, you'd understand why I had to fight for our family." Marcus collapsed into my arms then, sobbing like the little boy he'd once been. Around us, the wedding guests were slowly processing what they'd witnessed: the exposure of a murder conspiracy, the arrest of a serial killer, and the salvation of a family that had been targeted for destruction. Patricia appeared at my elbow, her face grim but satisfied. "Eleanor, the FBI wants to debrief you about the evidence. The recordings and documents you gathered are going to put both of them away for life." "Good," I said, still holding my son. "But first, I think we need to get Marcus out of that tuxedo and into something more comfortable. We have a lot of healing to do." As federal agents processed the crime scene and guests slowly departed with stories they'd be telling for the rest of their lives, I looked around at my vineyard, my family's legacy that Victoria had tried to steal. The emergency lights were still casting everything in red shadows, but for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could see clearly again. Justice had been served, my son was safe, and Victoria Thompson had learned the hard way that some families fight back. 3 months have passed since that red-lit wedding day became the most spectacular criminal takedown in Sonoma County history. Today, I'm sitting in my kitchen with my morning tea, watching Marcus work among the vines, and marveling at how much can change when the truth finally sets you free. Victoria's arrest made national news. The FBI had been tracking a series of suspicious deaths involving wealthy older men and their mysterious young wives, but they'd never been able to connect the cases until our evidence broke everything wide open. By the time the investigation concluded, Victoria was charged with 6 murders across 3 states, along with conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder in our case. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Victoria maintained her innocence throughout, claiming I was a delusional old woman who'd fabricated everything out of jealousy. But the physical evidence was overwhelming: the forged documents, the mercury traces in my hair samples, the recorded confessions, and testimony from her previous victims' families who'd been suspicious of their loved ones' accidental deaths. The jury took less than 4 hours to convict her on all counts. She received 6 life sentences without possibility of parole. Thompson got 25 to life for his role in the conspiracy. The prosecution proved he'd been Victoria's accomplice in at least 3 previous murders, helping her create false identities and forge documents in exchange for a percentage of the stolen assets. His cooperation with investigators once he realized Victoria was never going to save him helped solve several cold cases across the West Coast. But the most satisfying part of their downfall wasn't the prison sentences. It was watching Victoria's carefully constructed image crumble in real time. The wedding day footage went viral within hours. Someone's cell phone had captured her mask slipping, her rage exploding, her full confession screaming across the Vineyard courtyard. The video accumulated over 50 million views in the first week, with commentary ranging from horror at her crimes to admiration for what people called my epic takedown. Victoria had spent years cultivating an image as a sophisticated, caring woman who helped vulnerable older men navigate their final years. The footage destroyed that facade completely, showing the world exactly what she was: a calculating predator who preyed on love and trust. I donated the money Victoria had spent on our elaborate wedding, nearly $40,000 of stolen Vineyard funds, to the National Center on Elder Abuse. It felt appropriate to turn her theft into something that would help other families recognize the warning signs I'd missed for so long. Marcus has been the hardest part of healing from all this. The psychological damage Victoria inflicted on him runs deeper than her attempts to poison me. She didn't just manipulate his emotions. She systematically dismantled his ability to trust his own judgment. I keep wondering how I could have been so blind, Marcus said during one of our long evening conversations last month. The signs were all there. The way she isolated me from our friends, how she made me question your motives, the financial manipulation. How did I not see it? Because she was a professional, I reminded him. Marcus, this wasn't some amateur con artist. Victoria had been perfecting these techniques for over a decade. She studied psychology, learned how to exploit cognitive biases, and practiced on at least 6 other victims before targeting our family. You weren't weak or stupid, you were deliberately targeted by someone who'd made manipulation into an art form. Marcus started therapy 2 weeks after Victoria's arrest. Dr. Patricia Reeves, a specialist in psychological abuse recovery, has been helping him understand how Victoria's techniques worked and why they were so effective. Your son experienced what we call coercive control, Dr. Reeves explained to me during a joint session. Victoria used isolation, gaslighting, financial manipulation, and emotional dependency to break down his psychological defenses. The process is gradual and designed to make victims doubt their own perceptions while becoming increasingly dependent on their abuser's version of reality. The therapy is working, slowly. Marcus is learning to trust his instincts again, to recognize manipulation tactics, and to rebuild his relationship with me based on honest communication rather than the twisted dynamics Victoria created. But the real breakthrough came 6 weeks ago, when Marcus finally visited his father's memorial garden for the first time since Victoria entered our lives. I found him there at sunset, sitting on the stone bench Robert and I had placed among the heritage roses. He was holding one of his father's old business journals, reading entries from the early days of our vineyard expansion. Dad wrote about you in here, Marcus said without looking up. About how strong you were after he died, how you refused to let the vineyard fail even when everyone said you should sell. He was so proud of what you accomplished. Your father would be proud of you too, I said, sitting beside him on the bench. You helped me build this place into something beyond his wildest dreams. Victoria tried to take that away from both of us. I'm sorry I let her, Marcus said quietly. You didn't let her do anything, I corrected. She attacked our family using weapons we didn't even know existed. But we survived, and now we're stronger for it. The vineyard itself has thrived in the aftermath of Victoria's exposure. The publicity, while initially unwanted, has actually attracted new customers who admire what they call our family values and our refusal to be victimized. Our wine sales increased 30% over the past quarter, and we've had inquiries from distributors across the country who want to carry Whitmore wines. More importantly, Marcus and I are working as true partners again. The psychological barriers Victoria created are dissolving, and we're rediscovering the easy collaboration that made our vineyard successful in the first place. But the most meaningful change has been my decision to use this experience to help other families avoid similar predators. 2 months ago, I established the Rose Foundation, named after my mother-in-law who'd warned me about people who smile with their teeth but not their eyes. The foundation provides education about financial elder abuse, psychological manipulation, and the warning signs of predatory relationships. I speak at conferences now, sharing our story with law enforcement agencies, social workers, and family groups. The response has been overwhelming, apparently. Our experience isn't as unique as I'd hoped. Financial predators targeting family businesses and elderly individuals are more common than most people realize. The hardest part isn't recognizing the criminal behavior. I told an audience of estate planning attorneys last month. It's accepting that someone you love has been deliberately targeted and manipulated. Families often dismiss concerns about new romantic partners because they don't want to seem controlling or suspicious. But sometimes, protecting the people you love means asking uncomfortable questions and trusting your instincts even when you're told you're being paranoid. The Rose Foundation has already helped identify 2 other cases similar to ours, situations where young women were isolating older men from their families while systematically stealing their assets. In both cases, Early intervention prevented the relationships from progressing to violence. We're also working with tech companies to develop better identity verification systems for online dating platforms, making it harder for predators like Victoria to create false identities and target vulnerable people. The Vineyard has become more than our family business. It's become a symbol of resilience and the power of fighting back against those who prey on trust and love. Marcus designed a new wine label last month featuring the heritage roses from his father's memorial garden. The back label tells our story briefly. Sometimes the strongest families are those who've survived attempts to destroy them. This wine is dedicated to the power of truth, the importance of vigilance, and the unbreakable bonds that define real family. Every bottle sold contributes to the Rose Foundation's work protecting other families from financial predators. I've also started hosting support groups at the Vineyard for families who've experienced similar manipulation and abuse. There's something powerful about gathering in a place that was targeted for theft but survived to tell its story. You can't always prevent predators from targeting your family, I tell these groups. But you can create an environment where truth is valued over politeness, where family members feel safe raising concerns, and where love is measured by actions rather than words. The healing continues every day. Marcus laughs more easily now, asks my opinion on business decisions, and has started dating again, though. Dr. Reeves says it may be years before he fully trusts his judgment in romantic relationships. That's okay. We have time. Victoria tried to steal our future, but she failed. The Vineyard is thriving, our family bonds are stronger than ever, and every sunrise over these vines represents another day of freedom from her manipulation. Sometimes I still think about that moment in the wine cellar when I pressed the switch that brought her whole scheme crashing down. People ask me if I felt guilty about destroying Marcus's wedding day, about humiliating Victoria in front of 200 people, about the dramatic way I chose to expose the truth. The answer is simple. Number. Not for 1 second. Because sometimes, love requires difficult choices. Sometimes, protecting your family means being willing to be seen as the villain. And sometimes, the only way to save the people you love is to refuse to be victimized quietly. Victoria learned the hard way that when you target a mother's family, you'd better be prepared for war. And Eleanor Whitmore doesn't lose wars. Here I am, 3 months later, in the quiet sanctuary of my kitchen at dawn. The same kitchen where Victoria once sat planning my murder while pretending to care about family traditions. The same table where Marcus and I now share our morning coffee again, talking about Vineyard plans and healing from what she tried to take from us. My hands are wrapped around my favorite mug, the one Robert bought me for our 20th anniversary, painted with tiny grape clusters that have faded but never disappeared. Just like our family's resilience, I want to thank you for listening to this story, for staying with me through all the dark revelations and painful truths. Sharing this hasn't been easy, but it's been necessary. Because silence is what predators like Victoria count on. They depend on shame, isolation, and the assumption that their victims will suffer quietly rather than expose what's been done to them. But here's what I've learned in these 72 years, especially in these past chaotic months. Speaking truth about family betrayal doesn't make you a victim, it makes you a survivor. And survivors have an obligation to help others recognize the dangers that lurk behind charming smiles and manipulative kindness. If you've listened to this story, you probably recognize something in it. Maybe you've watched a loved one change under someone's toxic influence. Maybe you've felt that cold dread when your gut tells you something's wrong, but everyone around you insists you're being paranoid. Maybe you've experienced that helpless frustration when someone you love chooses their manipulator over their family. If any of this sounds familiar, I need you to understand something crucial. Trust that instinct. Trust that feeling in your stomach when something doesn't add up. Trust your knowledge of the people you love, even when others try to convince you that you're wrong. Victoria almost succeeded because I ignored Rose's warning about people who smile with their teeth but not their eyes. I dismissed my concerns because I wanted Marcus to be happy. Because I didn't want to seem like a possessive mother. Because I thought love meant stepping aside and letting him make his own choices. But real love sometimes means making hard decisions. Real love means protecting your family even when they can't see the danger themselves. Real love means being willing to be seen as the villain if that's what it takes to keep the people you care about safe. The questions I get most often when I tell this story are practical ones. How do you know when concern becomes suspicion? How do you protect someone who doesn't want protection? When do you intervene in an adult-child's relationship? The answers aren't simple, but they start with vigilance and communication. Create family environments where people feel safe raising concerns. Pay attention to gradual changes in behavior, especially isolation from long-term friends and family. Question rushed financial decisions and be suspicious of partners who seem overly interested in assets and inheritance. Most importantly, document everything. Victoria's scheme almost succeeded because she was patient and methodical. Our victory came because we were equally careful about gathering evidence and building an unshakable case. But beyond the practical advice, there's something more important I want to share with you. Healing from this kind of betrayal, whether it's a romantic partner who deceives you, a family member who steals from you, or anyone who exploits your love for their gain, requires a fundamental choice about how you'll define yourself going forward. You can choose to be defined by what was done to you, or you can choose to be defined by how you responded to it. Marcus and I chose to respond by building something stronger than what Victoria tried to destroy. The Rose Foundation has already helped 12 families identify and escape similar predatory situations. Our Vineyard employs more local people than ever before, supporting our community in ways that honor the legacy Victoria tried to steal. Most importantly, our family. Bonds are deeper and more honest than they were before she targeted us. Does that mean I'm grateful this happened? Absolutely not. I would trade all the positive outcomes to have those 2 years of manipulation and fear back. But since I can't change what happened, I'm determined to make sure it serves a purpose beyond our family's pain. The Vineyard still produces the same award-winning wines it always has, but now every bottle carries an additional meaning. When people taste our Cabernet or our Chardonnay, they're not just enjoying the fruit of our vines, they're supporting a family that refused to be destroyed, a business that survived a systematic attack, and a foundation that's working to protect other families from similar predators. That's the real victory Victoria never anticipated. She thought she could steal our assets, destroy our relationships, and erase our legacy. Instead, her crimes made us stronger, more connected to our community, and more committed to the values that built this vineyard in the first place. I sit here in my quiet kitchen most mornings now, watching Marcus tend the vines his father planted, and I feel something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. Not because our problems are over. Healing from psychological abuse is a long process, and there will always be challenges in running a family business. But because I know we've survived the worst kind of betrayal and come out stronger for it. The morning sun, streaming through my windows, illuminates dust motes dancing in golden beams, and I'm reminded of something Rose used to say, "Eleanor, light reveals everything eventually. The truth might take time to surface, but it always finds a way." She was right. Truth did find a way, even when it seemed impossible that anyone would believe an elderly woman's claims about attempted murder and psychological manipulation. Justice did prevail, even when Victoria's scheme seemed perfectly orchestrated. And love, real, protective, fierce, family love did triumph over greed and manipulation. So I want to ask you the same question I ask myself every morning as I sip my tea and plan another day of rebuilding. What truth are you carrying that needs to be spoken? What gut feeling are you ignoring because it seems easier than confronting uncomfortable realities? What family member needs your protection, even if they don't realize it yet? Don't wait for the perfect moment or the ideal circumstances. Don't assume that speaking up will make things worse, or that staying quiet will keep the peace. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let someone you care about be destroyed by a predator who's counting on your silence. Share your story in the comments below. Tell me about a time when you had to trust your instincts over everyone else's opinions. Describe a moment when you found the courage to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves. Let's create a community where people support each other through the hard decisions that love sometimes requires. Your experience might be the warning that saves another family from what we went through. Your courage in speaking up might give someone else the strength to take action before it's too late. And if you want to be part of this community of people who believe in protecting each other through shared vigilance and honest conversation, I hope you'll subscribe and continue this important work with us. Together, we can make sure that predators like Victoria find fewer victims and fewer places to hide. Because in the end, this story isn't really about Victoria's crimes or my revenge. It's about the truth that light reveals everything eventually, that real families fight for each other, and that sometimes the best way to honor the people you love is to refuse to let them be destroyed. My quiet kitchen, my morning tea, and my peaceful vineyard represent something Victoria could never understand and never steal. The victory of truth over deception, love over manipulation, and resilience over predatory evil. That's a legacy worth protecting. That's a future worth fighting for. And that's why I'll never regret pressing that switch in the wine cellar, plunging her wedding into darkness, and bringing the light of truth into our lives.